Welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, folks, today we got news. We got news. Well, it was about 1:30 today, and I'm checking X, and I see a post by Andy Martino, and it says the Mets have pivoted to Plan B post Alonso. They now consider it the most likely outcome that Alonso will sign elsewhere. They add Winker and will add a reliever, possibly a top one. And I'm telling you, that news that Alonso most likely, potentially, will not be a Met, frankly, didn't shock me. It didn't shock me, but I want to pose that question to you. How shocked is Mets Nation right now that Pete Alonso possibly, most likely, will not be a Met in 2025? Because just 48 hours ago, in fact, 5 days ago, when the Mets supposedly were offered that exclusive 3-year deal by Boris, I would say 90% of us Mets fans believe Pete Alonso would be playing for the New York Mets in 2025. But in just such a short period of time, in a 5-6 day span, things change drastically. Martino tweeting all day today how it will be very unlikely to see Alonso in that New York Mets uniform. And I got to say this right now. I got to say this. Boris and Alonso have screwed up royally. And I'm going to say this as well. Alonso had opportunities to become a Met. All right. So I know we have a lot of Alonso fans, right? And Alonso supposedly bleeds orange and blue. Whether this is just a ploy today and, this is fictional news and Alonso becomes a Met, I don't think it's going to happen. But let's just say this is kind of just BS and this is just posturing. At the end of the day right now, Boris and Pete Alonso screwed this up royally. I said 5 days ago, when all the news came out about, Pete Alonso and, that exclusive offer, that was odd. That was bizarre. That doesn't happen. Boris doesn't typically offer a specific and respective team a 3-year offer. My theory last Friday was that the New York Mets wanted to pivot at that time, that the New York Mets weren't interested around that time. And if you remember the prior 3 days or 4 days, you heard all this nonsense that Boris wanted that Prince Fielder 9-year deal. And then John Heyman goes, no, that's incorrect. He wants a 6-year deal. I mean, folks, at that time, a week and a half ago, the Mets were the only team interested. Yet Boris and Pete Alonso were pricing themselves out of the market. They were putting themselves in a position where no teams were interested at that price level. But the Mets remained in the fray. The Mets said, all right, you know what? We are still interested. But a few days of hearing this BS, I think really turned off David Stearns. I think, Steve Cohen and David Stearns said, you know what? This Boris, they're just not getting it. They are not getting it, and they are not coming to the realization that there's no market out there, and they're not coming back down to reality. And I think last week I said Boris and Pete Alonso got wind that the Mets were seriously considering pivoting elsewhere. And now we see it today. After a week of negotiation with the New York Mets and Scott Boras. Still, even though we have a 3-year framework, still you hear that the New York Mets and Boras were far apart in a financial negotiations. I mean, it's just really hard to fathom, folks. It is just really hard to fathom. But, like my video last night, I asked, how interested were the Mets really in Alonso? And how interested was Alonso in returning to the Mets? Because even though the Mets fans wanted to see Pete back in Queens, I really don't think there was strong interest. I think, yes, they would have took Pete back at that value contract, but at the end of the day, I just don't think there was strong interest by the Mets bringing back Pete, and I don't think there was strong interest by Pete Alonso returning to Queens, because I'm going to repeat, Pete Alonso turned down multiple contracts, and those are going to be the facts, folks. Pete Alonso turned down multiple opportunities to be a lifetime Met. Famously, that 7-year, $158 million contract, that's the famous one. That is the one that he could have been paid to be a lifetime Met. He turned it down. He was obviously looking forward, looking to the future. He thought he can eclipse that $200 million mark. I mean, fast forward a year, and that almost seemed insane. It seems like Pete Alonso may not even get close to $100 million. Forget about over $200 million. So whoever gave him advice last year and throughout this past year really misinformed Pete. I have to assume that Scott Boras was working with Pete throughout the year. They came up with a strategy how to approach this offseason. They set their price very high in the beginning of this offseason. 6-7 year deal was what they were looking for, at or around $200 million. They basically scared away the entire market. One thing I got to give Scott Boras credit for scaring away virtually every team. I mean, honestly, Pete Alonso, he's not a scrub. He may have lost a little on his fastball. He may not be that 53 home run guy, but he's still a decent player. For Scott Boras to virtually scare away an entire market, that is something. And at the end of the day, it seems like he scared away the New York Mets. Now you hear that the Toronto Blue Jays, all of a sudden when the Mets are pivoting, you hear the Toronto Blue Jays have heavy interest in the polar bear. You know what, folks? I don't know if that's just desperation, coming from the Boras camp, or if the Blue Jays are truly interested. But let's look at the facts. The Blue Jays want to sign Guerrero. The Blue Jays are supposedly interested in Bregman. And now the Blue Jays want to bring Alonso into the fray. And then if you analyze this more, Alonso is looking for a contract with opt-outs. Bregman is looking for a contract with opt-outs. And you didn't sign Vladdy. So if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, do you want to sign Alonso and Guerrero, who play the same position? That's question number one. And question number two, if you sign Alonso and you sign a Bregman, next year you're going to be in the same exact situation if both guys opt out and if you don't secure the services of Guerrero. So those moves are very questionable to say that Toronto Blue Jays is that team that you can identify as being competition for Mr. Pete Alonso. I'm not buying it. They may be interested. They may not be. But to me, it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense for Pete Alonso to go to Toronto. For Toronto's sake, it doesn't make sense. But when you look at it from the polar bear's sake, I mean, if you're a guy who wants to have a career year, I mean, you're going to go to the Toronto Blue Jays? You're going to go to the Toronto Blue Jays. Seriously. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Pete, really, I want to say good things about Pete, but in the last couple weeks, I just have not been impressed with Pete Alonso in terms of, that lifetime Met. I mean, everybody was telling me, yeah, Pete Alonso, trust me, he wants to go back to the Mets. No, I don't see it. I don't see it. He has had ample opportunities to be a New York Met and has spit in the face of Met fans. So I don't want to hear that he wants to be a New York Met. I don't want to hear it. You're going to tell me he's going to go to the Angels now? He's going to go to the Toronto Blue Jays because they're going to offer a little more money? I mean, the latest report I heard is that the Mets offered a 3-year fixed deal. So you're telling me the Mets offered a 7-year, $158 million deal. Then they offer a 3-year deal with opt-outs. Now they offer a 3-year deal that's fixed. And all these deals, for some reason, Pete Alonso finds something wrong with each of those deals. No, no, no. That's telling me you don't want to go back to the team. The only way Pete Alonso comes back to the Mets is if the Mets overpay, is if the Mets pay him like he's Miguel Cabrera and pay him that $31.1 million, which would be the record breaking contract value, average annual salary for a first baseman. That's the only way he's going to come back to the team he loves. No, and why does Pete deserve to be paid a historic contract? He's not coming off of a historic year. He's good. If you ranked him in Major League Baseball, what was he, the 80th best player in MLB, the 100th best player in baseball? He didn't deserve to be paid that record-based contract. And you see a situation where David Stearns was steel. David Stearns had ice in his veins. He had no emotions. He had nothing, no skin in the game. He didn't grow up in this franchise with the New York Mets. He didn't draft Alonso. He didn't see Alonso play here throughout the years. No, he sees Alonso as a 30-year-old, 6'3", a bit overweight first baseman who could be a defensive liability, who has that power tool. But other than that, he's a one-dimensional player who's aging and who has showed diminishing results in the last 2 years. He has declined greatly. Alonso from 2019 to 2022 was a very high upper echelon player, probably top 15 player in baseball. In the last 2 years, you could argue that Pete Alonso's not even top 50. Not even top 50. So, I mean, it's the Mets wanting to bring him back. I give him all the credit in the world for being loyal to Pete. But, like I said, Pete had his opportunities, and I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Pete Alonso and the Mets aren't going to be together potentially in 2025. All right, folks. Thank you all for joining in. Carlos, what's up? Will White, how's it going, my man? The Winker man is back, and I like that. I like that. Carlos, I see you wrote I'm hurting, and I honestly understand that. I understand that, and there's going to be a lot of Mets fans hurting. Me, I feel a little more detached to the situation because I've come to terms with Pete Alonso being a diminished ball player for the last year. I mean, I saw Pete Alonso play. I know that he has, value left. I know that he has something left in the tank. I know he can hit 35, 40 home runs, but I see a player who is on the downside. And I've done a lot of research in the last couple weeks, a lot of research. And from what I've seen, first basemen that profile like Pete get old, and they get old quick. 31, 32, there is a sharp, steep decline. Folks, look it up. Every single first baseman, no matter who they are, Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera, Todd Helton, Ryan Howard, the list goes on and on. Mark Teixeira, all these guys, first basemen that got these mega contracts, all of a sudden got old in their low 30s. And Pete Alonso, I know he's been a guy who plays in 160, 162 games, but, that durability factor from past players, you see these guys after age 30 aren't as durable. So, you know what? It is sad because he's a homegrown Met. He has 226 home runs. He's third on the all-time Mets home run list. I believe you just got David Wright. I'm off the top of my head. I believe he's got 242 home runs, and Darryl Strawberry's got 252. So, that being said, Pete Alonso this year could be the all-time home run Met leading in home runs if he stays another year. But, it's not about that. It's about building the best team. And I think although this step may hurt, David Stearns, I trust him. I know he knows how to build the team, right? So, you have other options. What are the other options? Right now, yesterday you heard the Mets, they have heavy interest in Vladdy Guerrero Jr. Toronto, they don't seem so interested in trading him yesterday, but things change quickly. And then also too, at the end of the day, they can't control the fact that, Vladdy could leave next year. So, whether we're able to trade for Vladdy Guerrero Jr. or sign him next year, we can significantly upgrade our talent at first base. And even if we don't trade for Vladdy, there are many options at first base. First base is not like shortstop. It's not like center field. It's not a premium position. And there are many players that you can put at first base. Short term, you can put Mark Vientos at first base. And then you can either go with the kids at the corner, Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Beatty. And frankly, I'm excited. I am freaking excited to see a Ronnie Mauricio because before he got injured, I mean, that guy was smoking baseballs. He's a switch hitter, 6'3". I thought the kid reminded me a little bit of L.A. De La Cruz. I may be a little crazy with that. I know he doesn't have the speed, but I just love Ronnie Mauricio. I love to see him play. Luis Angel Acuna, I love what I saw with him the end of the year. So you know what? This is going to give you an opportunity to discover the talented kids that we have on our team. And I love to see that. And if Brett Beatty has anything left to offer, this is going to give us an opportunity to either see him play, take advantage of his skills, or boost his trade value and potentially ship him off in a trade. Because if you can show that Brett Beatty could be a serviceable to good major league ball player, his value increases tenfold. As we all know, Brett Beatty is a former top prospect. So a lot of good things, a lot of reasons to be positive. So, although, it hurts to lose Alonso, I think if we look into the future, I think we are going to be better off. But sometimes you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And, I think we may be in the process of seeing that happen. Stoney, my friend, welcome to the Legend membership. Thank you so much for joining the Legend membership. I appreciate that, Stoney. You're the one who actually inspired me to start the membership, so I really appreciate you joining the channel. I think you've been a member for almost a year and a half now, almost 2 years, so thank you for being such a great, loyal supporter to the channel, and welcome to the memberships. I really appreciate that. I really, really do. All right, so let me get back to some of the comments. And we're going to talk about Winker too. Pete Alonso is obviously he's the big guy. Will, you wrote, screw Pete. After signing Soto, he freaked up the whole excitement with this BS. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I will tell you one thing. Pete Alonso and Scott Boras tried their damnedest to control these negotiations. They tried their damnedest. Remember when in December 25th, 26th, when the Mets supposedly offered that 3-year, $90 million contract, and at that time, Pete Alonso wanted the long-term deal, so he wasn't interested in any short-term deals. So they said no, and a few days later, you heard that Scott Boras and Pete Alonso were willing to wait until March or late February to get this deal done, or spring training. I mean, folks, that's ridiculous. If you're Pete Alonso and you care about the well-being of the Mets, it is not productive or conducive to David Stearns building a team if a key piece like Pete Alonso is holding out. So if you know the Mets are building something extremely special, as you mentioned, Will, they added Soto. They brought back Sean Manaea, who's the best friend, who's supposedly one of Pete's best friend. You would think he'd be like, hey, Pete, they're building something special. Come back at least on a 1-year deal with an opt-out and then test the market for next year. But no, Pete Alonso and Scott Boras, their plan up until, I would say, the first week of January was to hold out until March, potentially, late in spring training. That is not what Steve Cohen and David Stearns wanted to do. They went right back. They went right back to Scott Boras and said, you know what? This is not what's going to work for us. This is not. This is, if you want to play for us, great. We'll work something out. We'll try to work something out. But they made it damn clear that the Mets were not going to wait till March. They were not going to wait till March. So obviously in the first week of January, things sped up. Then all of a sudden, Pete changed his mind for like the 10th time, goes, all right, now we'll take a short-term deal, but now I want a record AAV salary per year. So, I mean, Pete Alonso kept asking for all these things that he didn't deserve. He didn't deserve. As much as you love Pete, and I love Pete, I loved watching Pete play, he didn't deserve a record-breaking contract. He didn't. Like really, if you rank him in out of all the Major League Baseball players last year, I'm being honest. If he made the top 50 ball players, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked. The guy didn't deserve that record-breaking contract. So the Mets probably offered him maybe a 2-year, $60 million contract, a 3-year, $75 million contract. I guarantee they offered him a contract that was more conducive or more respectable to what what he deserved. Probably around a Christian Walker contract. And I know some of, those loyal Pete Alonso fans are saying that's a slap in the face. No, that's business. That's business. If there were more teams interested in Pete Alonso, I'm pretty sure David Stearns and Steve Cohen would have evaluated this thing very, very differently. But the fact of the matter is, like I said, there's no teams interested. No teams are interested, and I'm still really having trouble believing that how interested the Toronto Blue Jays truly are. I want to see how that works out, because I think there's still a world here where the Mets get Winker, time goes by, and then you see the Blue Jays really aren't so interested. So let's see really how that transpired, because I'm very interested in that. I'm sorry, folks. I was just getting a call, so that kind of distracted me. Hobby, I always love your positivity. I always love what you bring to the table, and you are absolutely right. As a fan, let us concentrate on the guys we do have, and not the guys that will not be on our ball club. We're pretty good, and if you think about it, what did we do? Our pitching staff's going to be quite similar, but I think we're going to be better. Our top pitcher from last year is Sean Manaea. We brought Sean Manaea back. Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga didn't pitch last year. He's a guy who, the year before that, he was a Cy Young Award winning candidate, an all-star. He's hopefully going to be healthy. Then we got Clay Holmes. I frankly like that move, but I still think we're short. I'm not confident in guys like Frankie Montas not to be on that elite level. I really would like us to add another piece. That piece that I would like is Jack Flaherty. I like a guy like Jack Flaherty. I think Jack Flaherty has, I think he has upside. I think you put him in that pitching lab. Jack Flaherty, who was like 12-7 last year with a 3.13 ERA, pitched very well down the stretch, pitched phenomenally in Detroit. But, you saw him pitch against the Mets. He's got a nasty knuckle curve. His sinker is his 4th or 5th best pitch, which wasn't so great. But like Sean Manaea, the Mets tweaked that pitch, that sinker, and then all of a sudden he took it to the next level. So I think adding a guy like Jack Flaherty could help out that pitching rotation in a tremendous, tremendous way. Plus, you got guys like Brandon Sproat on the horizon. This guy's 24, going to be 25 soon. He's at the age where, you want to bring him up. So you take advantage of his prime. So, even though the pitching staff isn't, doesn't have that type of firepower that I want. Like, the Dodgers, obviously, they've invested over $150 million in that pitching staff. They have a lot of guys who could be a potential all-star, Cy Young award-winning candidate. Unfortunately, that's not our rotation, but we have a pretty respectable rotation with upside. I'll put it like that. Like I said, plus guys like Brandon Sproat, you bring them up, that's all the more potential right there. Stanley, how about Ryan Clifford at first base? I think Ryan Clifford in about a year's time, I could see that he just needs a little more seasoning. He's not quite ready. He's like a 3 true outcome player right now. You're either going to get a strikeout, you're going to get a walk, or you're going to get a home run. I think they want to work with him, be a little more complete of a hitter, but he's got a lot of potential, a lot of skill. And this is the type of team you want to build. You want to build a team where you can promote guys like Ryan Clifford, top prospects, and have them, fill that void for 6 years. That's how you kind of balance your team when you have players like Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor making those crazy salaries. Then you develop young players at other positions that have the potential to be stars and homegrown stars, like a Mark Vientos, like a Ryan Clifford, like a Ronnie Mauricio, like a Luis Angel Acuna. The Mets right now actually really need to develop their young guys into being very productive players so that they can go out next year and potentially invest a lot of money in a Guerrero. Because we see that the Mets they have a very targeted approach. And I respect it. They're going to invest, number one, in offensive players, right? They're going to invest in bats, guys who play every day, so you get more value right there. Guys who are in their mid-20s, guys who are about a bit younger, and guys who are of that superstar level. And I think what really intrigues the New York Mets about Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is the fact that you can pair Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in the lineup with the likes of Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos, list goes on and on, Brandon Nimmo. That's why I think the value of Vladimir Guerrero to the Mets specifically is extremely high. Because then if you couple those guys together, now you're building a lineup like the Dodgers when they have Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez. The Mets would have Guerrero, Soto, Lindor, Vientos. That's what the Mets want to do. Then if the Mets, you hear they're interested in high-level relievers, that's good, because if you're not as confident in your starting rotation, or you think your starting rotation is going to improve over time, remember, the Mets starting rotation got better as the year progressed. Remember that. Sean Manaea, he got better the second half of the year. Jose Quintana, for some reason, after August 25th, it clicked with him. But the Mets starting pitchers got better as the year progressed, and that goes to show you that the pitching lab, working with those pitchers, improve their performance over the course of the year. I expect in kind for that to happen to guys like Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes wasn't a starting pitcher in his career, or at least at the major league level. So he's going to want to get his feet under him. He's going to want to probably develop another 1 or 2 pitches. But, I expect the pitching staff to get better. So that's why having a very strong bullpen is going to be pivotal. You want to shorten the games. If you have a lights-out closer like Diaz and a lights-out in an 8th inning guy like Tanner Scott, now, folks, what we have is a 7-inning game. And, all of us who remember the Yankees back in the late 90s when you had Mariano Rivera and they had strong 8th inning guys, Graham Lloyd, Mike Stanton, they were able to shorten games. And, if you didn't get to the Yankees at the 6th or 7th inning, the game was over. So that's what the Mets need to do. That is what the Mets need to do. And I think they are going to pivot in that direction. I really do. I would expect more moves. I really do expect more moves to come. And Will, I've been saying this, you're right. I smell a big trade or signings coming, and I do expect a big move coming because the David Stearns and Steve Cohen are smart. They're extremely intelligent. If they are supposedly dumping Pete Alonso, they are doing it for a legit reason. And I don't think it's just because of Jesse Winker. I don't think. Jesse Winker, I love him. I love what he brought to the table. If you ever want to go back to my mid-season trade review show, I praise Jesse Winker, not because he's the best player, but because of his intangibles, what he brought on and off the field. You saw what he did in that Brewers series. He literally got into the heads of players on the other team. Willie Adames wanted to fight the guy in the parking lot. I love those type of gritty players. I remember when we were playing the Brewers in the first season, in the first series last year, Rhys Hoskins, I remember he hit a key home run, and he was basically taunting the Mets. And I'm like, you know what? Rhys Hoskins is one of those guys who needles the other team. He gets under their skin. I'm like, we need guys like that. Then throughout the year, obviously, we got, a guy like Jose Iglesias who brought a lot of fire and energy. But at the deadline, we got a gritty guy like Jesse Winker. Now, Juan Soto is the ultimate, gritty guy. Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame guy, but he's a guy who gets under the opposing players. So I like what they're building, not to mention Jose Siri. We have a lot of fire on this team. I kind of like it. I really do. And, you got to remember right now, we are not a finished product. I repeat, we are not a finished product. And that's very, very important to realize. Hobby, you're right. I saw Darryl Strawberry walk. Seaver traded. Pete's no big deal. Well, Pete had his opportunity. Had his opportunity to be a lifetime Met, or he had his opportunity to be a lifetime Met, but then he also had multiple opportunities to become a Met, at least for the foreseeable future. But he chose not to. He chose, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him. He's a free agent. You're not a free agent for, many times in your career. You want to take advantage of it. But I don't foresee him getting a crap load of money. So I'm interested to see what the details of this contract is going to be. How much did he essentially ditch the Mets for? I mean, if he gets like some type of 4-year contract, $120 million or $140 million, I'll be like, okay, you know what? He wasn't going to get that with the Mets. He wasn't going to get that. But if he somehow gets a 3-year deal, $80 million, or 3-year deal, $75 million, then I'm going to kind of scratch my head a bit. What's up, Jason? Jason, long time subscriber. Damn it, man, this is sad. Shaking my head, and again, we spoke about that. We spoke about that. It is going to be sad, but you know what? This is a look to the future. A look to the future. Even if you project this. Let's just say Pete was going to have 2 magical years, right? You fast forward 2 magical years. Hopefully, maybe that would have brought a World Series. Maybe it wouldn't have brought a World Series. But I think there would have been an eventual break from Pete, And I think that Stearns feels his production can be replaced. His defense can be replaced and be upgraded. And maybe home runs, you might need 2 guys to compensate for the amount of home runs that he hits. But his overall offensive production, I think Stearns feels that he can get that from other areas. And if you look at it last year, and anybody who watched every game last year knew that Pete wasn't the same player, right? Pete runners in scoring position. He left over 300 guys on base throughout the course of the year. That drastically hurt the team. Pete, he hit into ground balls in some pretty important times. But at the end of the year, Pete had that magical home run in the Brewers series. I mean, if Pete didn't do that, I think there'd be a lot less fans kind of, thinking twice. I mean, Pete had that drop ball or, didn't catch that foul pop up in the seventh inning. If, Pete never hit that magical home run, I'm thinking that this negotiation probably wouldn't have even gone this far. I'm thinking David Stearns would have pivoted probably in December elsewhere. The fact that Pete Alonso, built up that credibility, I think kind of, maybe put a little more pressure on Stearns to try harder to make things work, which, again, makes me point at, Pete Alonso that, you had opportunities to come back. We tried to bring it back. It's not like we pivoted early in the offseason. David Stearns, in my opinion, had full intentions to bring the polar bear back. We let so many first base options go off the board, so many offensive options go off the board, because I really felt that David Stearns felt that he could work something out with the polar bear. But if they're going to be unrealistic, if Scott Boras is going to ask for the moon, the skies, the stars, and an asking price, which Pete Alonso doesn't deserve, then it's just not going to work. All right, folks, we got 60 people in the chat right now. Thank you so much. Let's hit that like button. If you're not a subscriber, it's a great time right now to join the channel, especially if you are passionate. Even if you're not a Mets fan, consider joining. We love baseball. We're a diehard baseball channel, but we're also a very close community. We love, feeding off each other, gaining knowledge from each other. I mean, that's the great thing about this channel. And honestly, I was at work a couple hours ago, and I was like, I gotta get home. I gotta get home because I couldn't even focus on work. I'm like, big news is happening. And I think I got out of work around a little after 4. And Jesse Winker, I don't want to downplay the Jesse Winker signing, because Jesse Winker was a very important cog in the wheel of what the Mets did that second half of the year. He really was. Jesse Winker was a guy, wasn't the best hitter, but he was always a guy with a high on base. He was always a guy that put pressure on the opposing pitcher, right? So, you have a lot of guys in the lineup like that now. I mean, Juan Soto is the king of working the count. Juan Soto is a master at that. For all of you who haven't got a chance to witness Juan Soto play on a daily basis, this guy is, I'm telling you, you are going to love the at-bats. Love the at-bats that this guy puts up. But not only the bats, they're going to be entertaining for us, but they are super, super frustrating for the opposing pitcher. They tax the opposing pitcher. Now, Jesse Winker, he's also a guy with a high on base, and you got other guys in the lineup who have that type of potential to put the pressure on the pitcher. That's why I was kind of liking when I was evaluating who our best fits were. A couple of weeks ago, I said our best fits would probably be to get a Guerrero or get a Bregman, because Bregman does that too. Bregman is good at taking pitches. Bregman is good at not striking out a lot. He's good at, working walks. So if we decide to pivot in that direction, now you can plug Bregman at third base. You got a Gold Glove third baseman there, and then you could put Pete Alonso to first base. And those guys, former shortstop Bregman, he came up as a shortstop. Way more, he's got a way more athletic build than Pete Alonso. Maybe Bregman is a guy that Stearns could hold up over a 4-year contract. Hey, Music Man. Winker is insurance if Nimmo still has foot problem or a good fourth outfielder. It just, something's really not making sense. There's got to be another move coming, right? The outfield, the DH position, everything's all cluttered. I mean, you got so many players out there. You got Soto, you got Siri, you got Nimmo. You got Marte, Winker. You got really a lot of pieces right now, and I don't think they all fit the correct way. This kind of shows me why I think the Mets were trying to trade Marte a couple weeks ago, just because all these guys don't really fit. They just really don't fit. So I have to mention, I have to imagine that a couple moves are coming, even if they're dump moves where the Mets are willing to eat a lot of Marte's salary just to make the roster flow a little better, because it's a very clumpy roster right now in the outfield. You got Siri, he's a good defensive guy, but other than that, I mean, the defense is shaky. Nimmo plantar fasciitis. Sorry, I got trouble saying that word, but I'm a little iffy on him. A little iffy on him. Marte, obviously, he's got all the injuries in the world. Soto, he's not known as the best defensive guy. So, and I know that David Stearns is a guy who's very big on defense. So I really see things coming. It's just hard to see what exactly is coming. But, mark my words, there are big moves coming, really big moves. I believe I would say 2 or 3 big moves. And then obviously we got to address the bullpen. But right now it's really not making sense with the roster configuration. I'm just checking out all the Mets news throughout the day. So I read you the tweet by Andy Martino, the first tweet a couple hours ago. It's really funny with Andy Martino. So obviously he goes that the Mets have pivoted to plan B. Post Alonso, they now consider it the most likely outcome that Alonso will sign elsewhere, right? So, that's yet to be determined. Until Alonso signs on the dotted line, he's still a free agent. He's still an option. So, we don't know anything for sure. Yes, it looks likely he's going to be elsewhere. But then Andy Martino also writes, this is a similar approach to what the Yankees did post Soto, spreading the funds around on the roster. I mean, right now, post Alonso, if you want to say that, even though Alonso's not officially gone, all we've done is acquire Jesse Winker. Now, if we sign Alonso or not, I don't think that would have affected our ability to make moves after. So spreading the funds around, post Soto, I mean, honestly, that's a big stretch. We only made one move. I don't know what you mean with that, Andy. And also, too, Andy did reiterate that Alonso is not known to have a deal elsewhere. It is rumored that the Blue Jays are interested, but how many times in the last, let's say, month, we read an article, Sports Illustrated, any respective site you go on, and you see the Blue Jays are interested, the Nationals are interested, many teams are interested, and it seemed like that news, or the Red Sox were interested, that was news generated by the Boris side to gain leverage. Strike Blitz, you're right. Siri just went off in the fall league. Think he might have won an MVP. I like the Siri move. I really do. Even when if you want to check out my video when we first acquired him, I like that move. A guy you get for a little over $2 million, an elite glove in a premier position on the field for a little over $2 million, a guy who has been able to hit home runs at a very pretty good clip. a pretty good clip. I mean, he's had a low average, but if they could somehow tweak something in his mechanics and get this guy right, he's 29 years old. He's not over the hill. I think he's a very good value play. He's the perfect guy a David Stearns would love to acquire for a very low price, get him in the David Stearns system, tweak a couple of things, and then you got a very nice ball player, especially with Nimel's foot injury. Siri, I could see, Siri getting a lot of run. And then, I mentioned all the outfielders. I forgot Taylor. I forgot Tyrone Taylor. So, you got a lot of outfielders, a lot of potential outfielders. Not to mention the young guys. Jet Williams, he's not going to be that far away. Drew Gilbert, he shouldn't be that far away. I believe he's like 25. So you got a lot of prospects who are knocking at the door, not to mention the trio of Acuna, Mauricio, and Brett Beatty. So the Mets had some youngsters too that they want to see, But here's the deal. I'm a guy right now, 2025 World Series. This is the time you get Juan Soto, you go for a World Series. I don't want to hear any baloney. If you want to try out some of the youngsters at second base, and maybe one other position, that's fine. You rotate them in and out. But a majority of the team, I want it to be proven. And I certainly would like Stern throughout this season to bolster the pitching rotation. Now, I understand he's a guy who's not going to go under pressure, and he's not going to rush moves like Cashman. I don't think he's going to give 8-year deals to anybody in their 30s. But throughout the course of this year, I expect Stearns to continually try to improve the starting rotation. And again, like I said, you got the pitching lab. So that in turn, the pitching lab working with guys like Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, the pitching rotation should naturally get better. But, David Stearns, he has to be ready to pivot because Frankie Montas, he's a career number 4, number 5 pitcher. That's not a guy I want to hang my hat on. McNeil, the question of McNeil's going to be very interesting. As we took note last year, McNeil, his playing time was heavily diminished or heavily cut off by Iglesias. Iglesias took a lot of playing time, from Jeff McNeil. I still think Jeff, has something left. He's a former hitting champ, but he's a guy who doesn't have a lot of power. I think he's going to be, that spot starter, a guy off the bench. I think the days of McNeil being penciled in as an everyday starter, in my opinion, are over. And I think that's fine because you want to grow and develop a guy like Mauricio or a guy like Luis Angel Acuna. I'm fine if those guys prove themselves in spring training, just like Pete Alonso did in 2019. If the guys prove themselves to be viable major league options, I'm fine with having those guys start at second base, third base, and then having other guys, veterans, come off the bench. I want to grow these youngsters if they deserve it. And if they don't deserve it, you have to go out and get a proven commodity, not an aging commodity, a proven commodity. Because as we saw last year, you got a commodity in JD Martinez. What happened? He did good the first month and a half, but naturally, what he did what every 36-year-old DH would do. He literally got old the second half of the year. So we don't need that. We don't need that. Come on, Hobby. Squirrel at first base. I know you got to be kidding me. I know you got to be kidding me. The Squirrel, I know he's the jack of all trades guy, but I mean, unless he's filling in, I mean, I'm not looking to have him play any significant time at first base. All right, so right now I'm looking at our depth chart. So, all right, so catcher, we're pretty much set. We got Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens. First base. The depth chart has Mark Vientos at first base. Second base, we got Jeff McNeil, Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna, Jared Young. And then third base, right now it's a little shaky. Obviously you have Mark Vientos there as well, but then after Mark Vientos, it's not much. Luis De Los Santos, Jared Young. But, this is just the Mets depth chart. I mean, you can obviously move Ronnie Mauricio to third base as well. Then shortstop, Lindor and Acuna. Left field, you got Nimmo, Taylor, and Jeff McNeil. Center field, you have Taylor, Siri, and Nimmo. And right field, you have Soto, Marte, Taylor, and Jeff McNeil. So outfield, we seem to be set. Right now, we're certainly looking for that. Certainly looking for either a first baseman or I mean, I wouldn't say third base. The only third baseman I'd be looking for is if he's a Gold Glover. But then again, like Bregman is a guy I like to see at third base, but I don't want to see. I don't want to see Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado is a guy that said that he would waive his no trade clause to come to the New York Mets, but I'm really iffy about that. I'm really iffy about Arenado. Let me see. Arenado is going to be 34 years old this year. He's going to be 34 years old. Last year, he hit 272. That's not that bad. He played in 152 games, 16 home runs, 71 RBIs, OPS 719, OPS plus 101. So 101 OPS plus. So he's literally 1 point above league average. In 2023, OPS plus of 108. So the last 2 years, I mean, Nolan Arenado really kind of took a step down. Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna go after a guy, an aging veteran with diminishing skills, I would rather play a youngster. I'd rather spend my time developing a youngster than give time to an aging Nolan Arenado. That's me. I mean, if he kind of was a little more consistent, like if he was like an OPS plus of 120, 130, yeah, but you could see in the last 2 years, like his numbers took a dramatic drop. So yeah, the Bleachers Report, Zachary Reimer predicts JD Martinez to sign with the San Diego Padres. Good. I mean, good for Martinez. I mean, I wasn't sure if any team was going to be interested in him. I wonder how we're all feeling about the Roki Sasaki thing. Roki Sasaki, like I said, that would have been phenomenal. That would have been great. It would have been great. But you know what? Fact of the matter is, the geography of us being in New York kind of hurts us with a lot of these Japanese ball players. Some guys, they don't care where they go, but a lot of these guys want to go on the West Coast. Um, so it kind of hurts. But at the end of the day, you got to feel happy. You got to feel happy about the things that go right. And, the fact of the matter is, we signed an extremely talented, very talented international player. Very talented international player that, I've been learning about the last couple of days, Elian Pena. Actually, I'd say the last 3 or 4 months. But Elian Pena looks like this kid could be the real deal. Really could be the real deal. I was listening to Joe DeMayo the other day, and Joe's a guy who's big on prospects, and he was saying that this kid in a couple months could be a top 10 New York Mets prospect in the farm system. Just goes to show you. And what that tells me is that this kid is on the fast track. Even though he's 17 years old, they're comparing him to Rafael Devers, and they are also saying that this kid could be a guy who comes up, one of those kids that comes up at age 19, age 20, and a la a Bryce Harper, a Mike Trout. We haven't had many of those situations where we have guys come up at 19, 20. A lot of these prospects that we bring up, Pete Alonso, how old was he? 24. Mark Vientos, how old was he? 24. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to bring up a really young guy. If Elian Pena, you sign him at 17, he has 2 strong years in the minors, you develop him. It'd be nice to see him with the team at age 19, 20. Soto's in his year 3. Lindor is still 32. I mean, he's still fairly young. And then you bring a young kid like that. I mean, I really like this move. You got the short-term burn of losing Sasaki, but, the Mets gambled with this kid, giving him a $5 million bonus. Obviously, that's the highest in the class. So it seems like Elian Pena is getting the highest money, and, rightfully so. The kid seems like he's a talent. I apologize, folks. I've been reading what the latest news is. I've been ignoring the chat. Let me just say what's up to everybody. I'm just gonna go through everybody. Carlos, what's up? Will, Hobby, Jeremiah, Mats, Stanley, S-Man, Skip, Stony, Will. I said you're Ernie, Stanley, Music Man, Jason, Strike Blitz, Don, Geraldo, Ron, Jason. My eyes are bad, folks. So if I say names twice, I apologize, but I extra appreciate you. Tio, my guy, what's up? Scott, what's going on? Yeah, all is well here. Just got back from work, heard the news, had to jump on. Big news. Honestly, folks, the last couple of weeks have been dead. See, this is my light. The last couple of weeks have been dead with news. So, I mean, I'm glad we had some things transpire. Jesse Winker, yeah, that was the big news in the last 3 weeks, or, since Sean Manaea. But still, more things are going to happen. Trust in David Stearns. Trust in the man, David Stearns. And the people who don't like David Stearns, at the end of the day, look at the facts. First year, NLCS championship, 2 games short of the World Series. The Mets last year didn't have Senga, their best pitcher, and they didn't have Juan Soto. This year, you have Soto, you have Senga. They're going to have a better bullpen. I mean, and don't forget, when the season starts, that's not the end of the roster. David Stearns is a guy who continually, throughout the course of the year, will improve the team. He believes in making these tiny incremental improvements. So if you make 100 little improvements, by the end of the day, that's going to equate in a very large improvement. It's annoying and it's monotonous to follow if you're following it in real time, but over the course of a long time, you're going to see that David Stearns knows what he's doing, and he's going to be a successful general manager / president. Ah. I got to get the Christmas tree down. Although I might make it a Valentine's Day tree. I don't know, folks. You saw the other day. I knocked all these pictures down, but fix that right. Okay. Jonathan, I missed your name. I'm sorry about that. How's it going, my friend? And folks, if I missed anybody's name, I apologize. I got really bad eyes. And let me just say this right now. It's we're an hour into the chat, so let me do some house cleaning stuff or whatever that saying is. All right. So this was brought to my attention the other day by a couple of really, really good members of the channel. Richard being one of them. Another member, a really good member, saying that comments were being deleted. Comments. And these are by really good members. Like Richard's been a member for 2.5 years. I love the guy, great contributor, brings a lot of good stuff to the table. For some reason, his comments were being deleted right away. Then my wife tells me her comments are being deleted right away. So I know if you write something offensive, that's going to get your comments deleted. I don't even see it 90% of the time. YouTube automatically deletes it. Then another thing that deletes your comments, let's say you say something offensive, another member or another person may be offended, they report you, right? Okay, so if you're offensive, that's a way for your comments to be deleted. But these members, their comments weren't deleted because they were offensive. My wife's comments weren't offensive. They were deleted. My, friends, Richard, other members, Stanley, comments weren't, deleted because they were offensive. So why were they deleted? So I did a little research, and comments that could appear to be repetitive or promotional, like my wife was saying, "Oh, great channel, great job, Dominant Mets Nation." That got deleted because it was seen as a promotional, promoting my channel. So that's why that got deleted. So my close subscribers, members, everybody, but even the people who have been with me the longest, trust me, I'm not deleting it. I love when we interact. So I just want you to know that it's not me. That I could try to see if I can change the settings around. But for me doing my research, if it appears to be promotional, or obviously if it's harmful, when I know 90% of the comments are not harmful, but they might be in that promotional or repetitive bucket, you may sound like a bot. I don't know if you're using Chat GPT. Maybe my wife was doing it. I don't know. But my wife's comments got deleted, so I had to look into it for her. And I looked into it for my friend Richard and my friend Stanley. Yeah, Dan. You're saying it's not just your channel; it happens everywhere. The thing is, I've lost like some really, really like good subscribers that all of a sudden message me and say, "I'm unsubscribing because you deleted my comment." And meanwhile, I just log on, I see the comment. I've never ever deleted their comment, but I feel bad because obviously some feelings are hurt for no reason. So I just want everybody to know that at least here I'm not deleting any comments. I'm the one in the videos. I always ask for people to comment, so it helps the channel grow. I enjoy reading it. I like to see that. So obviously I'm not deleting it. The only time I may delete a comment is if somebody is saying something hurtful to somebody else, and obviously that's not what I'm looking for. That's why I might delete it, but maybe that happened like a handful of times in the last year. CeeLo, what's up? Number one. Uh-oh, that sounds promotional. Wing, you know what? I like that. Let's get Pete a standing O when he comes to City. And you know what, folks? That's going to be a good question. That's going to be a good question. And I tell you this, we're going to see how this transpires. If Pete goes to Toronto and you hear Toronto offers Pete a 4-year deal, $140 million, Pete's going to get a standing O. Pete is going to get a standing ovation because it's something the Mets were never going to do. But if Pete goes and he signs with Toronto for a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal at a very little amount, or you hear a bunch of nonsense um, comes out between where Pete Alonso did this or did that to avoid coming to the Mets, or you hear he didn't want to come out, then obviously Pete's response isn't going to be so nice. At the end of the day, I do think Pete, regardless, deserves that appreciation. I do think that he does deserve an applause, but I think that fans, we are we're emotional. We're emotional. And if we think a guy left us because he didn't like us, I think that's going to affect the type of applause that he gets. Tio. That's funny. Yeah, you're right. We could definitely show that too. That's funny. So there's a lot, there's really a lot of kind of heat around Tanner Scott. I mean, right now, I think I saw like 3 or 4 different articles about the Mets possibly getting involved in Tanner Scott. I mean, we've heard this the last 3, 4 weeks that the Mets were sniffing around Tanner Scott. We know that they met with Tanner Scott, so the interest is real. Tanner Scott would be, I think he is the perfect piece for this team. I mean, we already have Edwin Diaz, right? That right-handed dominant type closer. If we can get that lights out 2022 version of Edwin Diaz, that would be freaking phenomenal. But if you get the left-handed version of Edwin Diaz to go in the 8th inning, and these guys are interchangeable. You can, if there's going to be lefties in the 9th inning, Tanner Scott can go to the 9th. But for the most part, you're going to have a left-handed Edwin Diaz in the 8th, and you're going to have Edwin Diaz in the 9th. I mean, that's, like I said, going to shorten the game, and that is really going to play with the strategy the Mets have in every game. Every game, it's going to be so significant. So I think Tanner Scott is a major weapon. But most importantly, the reason why I'd like to invest in a couple good relievers right now is to avoid the nonsense at the trade deadline. We know Stearns is stubborn, right? Stearns is stubborn. The reliever price is going to be high, so you're not going to be able to get a quality reliever at the deadline. Let's be honest. Stearns is not going to pay up. The price is going to be high for any good quality relievers. So the time is now for us to get a good quality reliever. So if Stearns is going to pay up, it's going to be now. So I don't mind Stearns overpaying money because money is our weapon. But I wouldn't want him to overpay in prospects. So right now, Tanner Scott, you give him a little extra money, come to Queens, pitch with Edwin Diaz, and hopefully make a deep championship run. But I actually want more than Tanner Scott. Get the other guy. Like, I also want David Robinson. I'd be interested in him. Ryan Stanek. I'd be interested in him. I'd be interested, obviously, Bruce Raley, Drew Smith, some lower tier guys. But the other guy that I was looking at. I mean, the other guy I was looking at too. I don't know why his name slipped my mind. So Tanner Scott, get Tanner Scott, but why not go crazy? Get a Kenley Jensen. I get it. Get a guy on that level. If you deem Carlos Estevez as on that level, get two solid relievers. Go nuts. Seventh, eighth, ninth inning. Make those lockdown innings. Shorten the game to a 6 inning game. If you're not as confident in your starting rotation, this is a perfect way to attack, the situation. Perfect way. There's a lot of relievers available. A lot of relievers. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up, but before we go, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you best case scenario, not likely scenario. I want to give you good news. Let's give you best case scenario. Right now, out of the bullpen, you get Tanner Scott. Then you get let's go. Yeah, let's go. Tanner Scott, Kenley Jensen. You get those two guys. You can get more relievers if you want to get second tier guys like Ryan Stanek, Drew Smith. You could go after those guys. But the two guys you must get to improve your bullpen are Tanner Scott and Kenley Jensen. And then even David Robinson. But Tanner Scott, Kenley Jensen. Let me just go with that. Then starting rotation, you add Jack Flaherty, right? So in your bullpen, you got Scott, you got Jensen. In the starting rotation, you have Jack Flaherty. Now in your lineup, you add a Bregman and you add a Guerrero. Now I know that's probably unlikely, but the best case scenario would be that. And if the Mets would be able to pivot to something like that, I think all Mets fans would say, bye-bye, Pete. Bye-bye, Pete. But I want to be considerate because I know there are Mets fans right now who are still hurting. Sorry. My former boss called me. I'm wondering what she wants. Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm just trying to see the latest news on Pete Alonso. So It looks like within this last week that the Mets made an offer to Pete Alonso. According to Pat Ragazzo, it was a 3-year deal, and Pete Alonso and his camp rejected the latest offer. So, and before that happened, Steve Cohen and David Stearns told Scott Boras that they need an answer and they need an answer quickly. So the Mets proposed a 3-year deal to Pete Alonso. There was no opt-outs. To be clear, there were no opt-outs. No opt-outs. I'm going to make a comment on that. No opt-outs. Pete Alonso, Scott Boras immediately rejected that contract. Doesn't say how much. I don't believe it says how much. This is from MLB insider Ken Rosenthal is reporting that the Mets made a counter offer of a 3-year deal straight up with no opt-outs, which Alonso rejected. Okay. All right. So again, so that was about like the third contract that Alonso rejected from the Mets. All right. So that's a fact. But I think something is very significant of note. I think in the last week and a half, I think the Mets really soured on Pete Alonso. Really soured on Pete Alonso. I get this in the back of my head. I think that the Mets got wind that they believe the only reason why Pete would go back to the Mets is to build his value for that 1 year and leave. So the Mets gave him an option. You want to come back, Pete? You're going to come back for a 3-year deal. You're not going to use us to build your value. Number one. That was one part of the thought process. The second part of the thought process is, all right, if he doesn't, it seems like he wants the opt-outs. That's the only thing he wants. Then, give him a 3-year deal, no opt-outs. He rejects us. Okay, fine. The Mets did their due diligence. They made that final offer to them, and they can kind of get a little bit of closure on that and move on. But folks, I get it. I get that they really, it seemed like they really soured on Pete. And if we were going to force Pete to come back here, it was going to be tough. If Pete didn't want to come back here because we weren't paying him or he thought that we disrespected him, I don't think it was going to work out. And if you really think about things, we just gave Juan Soto almost $800 million. And Pete, he's a human being. He's has feeling. He's got to feel a certain way. He's got to feel jealous. That's probably why he was asking for the moon, the stars, almost $200 million, because he sees that the Mets were able to give this guy, who's a superstar, a generational player, not even in Pete Alonso's league, but you got to, when you're a free agent, you ask what you ask for. So, all right, folks, that was just the latest update. I just want to give that to you before we get out of here. But let me thank you all. I appreciate it. We've been in here for a little over an hour and 20 minutes. We got a couple of videos coming out. Stay tuned. Set your alerts. If you're new, like I said, welcome. If you haven't joined the channel, subscribe, like. I see all your comments, and I just want to continue to thank everybody for supporting the channel. And again, Stony, thank you for your newest membership. Thank you for becoming a member. I really appreciate that. You are a legend. All right, folks, have a great night, day. And if anything does happen, we will jump back on and I'll let you know my thoughts.